Hi guys, Jonathan here with Farmer's Friend. Today we're going to be showing you the installation process of our classic Caterpillar tunnels. We're building two tunnels. One is our Classic Pro and the other is our standard classic Caterpillar tunnel. And also if you've ordered a 14-foot wide or a 16-foot wide tunnel in 4-foot or 5-foot bow spacing configurations. This video will be relevant for all of those variants, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is unpack your pallet and identify all of the individual components. So we're going to do an overview of what you should have in your order here. First, you're going to have your bow sections. You have the side sections, which are swaged on one end, and then your center sections, which have no swage on either end. And then we're going to have a roll of rope. We're going to have your greenhouse plastic, your kit box with all of the hardware, nuts, bolts, etc. Then you're going to have your single channel and spring wire and your rebar. Now, if you've purchased a Classic Pro tunnel, you will also have wind bracing, your lift kit, and your center purlin. Now we're going to go over the tools that you need to install this tunnel. First, you'll need a ladder that's at least 8 feet tall. We're going to need a sledgehammer for driving rebar, or if you have a jackhammer or would like to rent a jackhammer, we sell the adapter for a jackhammer to drive the rebar. That's probably what we're going to be doing today because it's a lot easier. Next, you'll need a impact driver with the 3/8 magnetic driver bit, which the bit is included in your kit, so don't have to worry about that. You'll need a long tape measure that'll run the length of your tunnel, and you'll need a smaller one for measuring the width of the tunnel. And then we need a knife or some scissors for trimming plastic. We'll need some snips, some wire snips for cutting the spring wire, and then a pair of safety glasses, a Sharpie marker. And then if you're doing a Classic Pro, in addition to these tools here, you'll need a level, a couple of sockets. We have a 1/2 inch deep well socket and a 14mm deep well socket, and we have a adapter driver for our impact drill. And then we have 2 pairs of pliers and 10 snips to cut your single channel. Once you've identified the location that you're going to be building your tunnel and your layout, the next step is to install the rebar. So we're starting here on our front corner, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the sledgehammer. You first of all have to have somebody that trusts you, that will hold it for you, and then you're just going to start driving it, and we're going to drive it in until we have 12 to 16 inches out of the ground. Now we're going to take our tape measure and run down the length of the tunnel. We're doing a short 20-foot long tunnel. We want to pull our tape measure nice and straight. This time we're going to be using the jackhammer, so we'll lift that up, slide the driver over the rebar, and then just try to drive it in nice and straight, leaving about 12 inches out of the ground. At this point, you can take a string and run from your rebar on that end down to this end to get a nice straight line. But the way I generally do it, if I have a tape measure like this, is just hold the tape measure nice and straight and then just use this as our straight line, because then we got to come back now and drive in the rest of our rebar on 5-foot centers, and we can just use our tape measure as that straight edge. Now that we have all of our rebar on that side, we're gonna find a position for our front corner post on the right side of the tunnel. So this is a 16-foot wide tunnel, so we have the width measurement already laid out from that corner post. And then we're gonna also do a diagonal. And this is if you wanna get it really nice and square. With Caterpillar tunnels, oftentimes that level of precision is not really necessary, but if you do wanna make sure that it's perfectly square, rather than just eyeballing it, you can look at the measurement chart in the manual for the diagonal measurement for the length of tunnel that you're installing. And so now that we have the diagonal and the width measurement kind of aligned here on this corner post. We're going to go ahead and drive this in. Now for the last corner post, we've run 20 feet down length here and 16 feet width here. We're going to drive this rebar right at that corner location. And then with our tape measure stretched, we'll just come back down here and put the rest of the posts in. The next step is to install the anchor plates over the rebar. We have two different types of anchor plate systems here. We have our earth lock system, which is going to be for your 4 corner posts. And then we have just our regular larger anchor plates now for the rest of the middle bows. So we're going to first install the easy clips, and on the earth lock we have this 1/4 inch hole here, and we're going to slide the easy clips over that through that hole. So it can be a little bit tricky, but you just kind of have to snap it on and get it to where it's sitting in that position. And then for the regular anchor plates, it's also the same. You just snap it on there and get it hanging like that. Now we're going to take the anchor plates and slide them over the rebar. The earth lock plates, rebar goes in the center hole, and then this tab here is towards the inside of the tunnel. And then the rest of them just slides over, and you want your easy clip on the outside of the tunnel. The next step is bow assembly, and we have our classic center bow section, which has no swage, and then we have our side bow sections, which have the swaging on it. So we're just going to take these 2 sections and slide the joint together. We want to be doing this on as flat of a surface as possible. If you have a concrete or paved area, that would be great. If not, just pick the flattest ground that you can. The more uneven it is, the more misalignment you'll have in your joints, which will make your bows a little bit crooked sometimes. So just try to do it on a nice flat section. And then we're going to take our self-tapping screws, and we're going to put one about 1/2 inch above the joint, and we're doing them on the inside of the bow. That's going to be kind of facing towards the inside of the tunnel, because we don't want to do them on the outside where it would interfere with the plastic. We're putting 2 screws in each joint, so you'll do the first one about 1/2 inch up from the joint, and then you'll go about another 1.5 inches and put the second screw in. Now we're going to repeat the same process on the other joint. Now we're going to install the side curtain hooks. This is for ventilating the plastic, and this 20-foot tunnel kit comes with 4, which means that we're going to be putting the side curtain hooks on 2 of our bows. So what we're going to be doing is just sliding this up over the base of the bow on both sides and doing that on 2 of our bows. Now we're going to repeat this same process and finish assembling the rest of the bows. If you purchased a classic Pro tunnel, the next step is to install the lift kit, which is height extensions. And we're just going to slide these onto the base of the bow. And then we're doing the same process as the bow joints with installing 2 self-tapping screws on the inside of the bow. Now you'll repeat that same process on the other side and on the rest of the bows. Now that our bows are assembled, we're going to install them over the rebar, and you're going to reference the chart in the manual for where the bows with the side curtain hooks go, and it will depend on which length you have, but the chart in the manual lays that all out. But for sure you're going to be starting with a bow that does not have the side curtain hooks, and you want to orient the bow so that your self-tapping screws at the joint are facing the inside of the tunnel so they don't puncture the plastic on the ends. The next step is to install the wind bracing on the front of the tunnel. Now, if you have a standard classic tunnel, you do not have wind bracing, so you can skip this step. We're gonna take the band clamps and we are going to use a couple pairs of pliers to just open them up a little bit so that we can get them over the base of the bow. And then we'll take the pliers and squeeze it back together enough to where we can get the bolt through. Now, you always need to make sure that the bolts go from the outside of the tunnel towards the inside so that the end of the bolt does not puncture your plastic. And at this point, we'll take a nut and get it started on the bolt. And we're gonna put this just a couple inches off the bottom of the bow, and then we'll go ahead and tighten this down. Now we're gonna take 2 band clamps and slide them over the bow. If there happens to be a side curtain hook here, you wanna make sure that they are above the side curtain hook. And then again, we'll use our pliers to squeeze them back together. And then we're gonna slide them up and find the natural connecting point between the wind brace and the bow and get the bolt through. And then we're gonna just finger tighten this at this point. And now we're gonna take a level. Now you can just eyeball this if you're comfortable with that, but if you wanna get it really pretty precise, you can put a level on the bow, and we're gonna slide this until the level is reading plumb. Alrighty, right about there. Once we find that point, we're gonna go ahead and tighten down this band clamp. Now we're gonna repeat the same process from the second bow to the first bow, and then repeat it on the other side of the tunnel. The next step is to install the Purlin strap. Now, if you have a classic pro tunnel, you can skip to the next step. We're gonna be using our tape measure here to come out about 8 to 10 feet, depending on how much room you have at the end of your tunnel. But we wanna get that measurement for where we're driving our posts in. So we have plenty of room here, so I'm gonna come out to 10 feet. That will just make the angle of the plastic and strap a little less steep. And we're gonna try to center this up in the tunnel. So we wanna visually look here to make sure that we're pretty close to in the center of the end of the tunnel. And then we're gonna just be driving this about 2 feet into the ground. And we're gonna do it at a pretty steep angle, something just about like that. So we have some good leverage to kind of pull against this. Now we're gonna take the second post and we're gonna drive it in parallel with the first one, about 2 or 3 inches gap in between them. Now we'll repeat that same process on the other end of the tunnel. Next, we're gonna take our strap clasp. We're gonna slide it over one of these end posts, and then we're gonna take the end of the strap and pull it up through the clasp, and then put that all the way down towards the ground. Now we're gonna take this strap and we're gonna loop it around each bow. So it's gonna go over the top. See if I can do this without a ladder. Step stool probably would be the easiest. So you're gonna loop over the top, down under, and then back over. And we're gonna do that on each bow all the way down. We're gonna try to keep that in the center of the tunnel. Now we're gonna bring it down to the posts on the far end of the tunnel, and we're gonna leave a couple feet extra, and then we'll go ahead and cut this. Now, if you have a lighter or a match, it'd be a good idea to go ahead and melt the end on this so it doesn't fray out too bad. And then we're gonna slide it up through the clasp and then over the post. At this point, we're just gonna go ahead and snug it up a little bit, but not get it too tight, because we wanna adjust it a little bit to make sure it's nice and straight down the middle of the tunnel. So I'm gonna go ahead and come back and just try to straighten this up. All right, now that we have it straight, we're gonna go ahead and snug it up a little bit more, but still not put a lot of tension on it. Now we're gonna come to the side of the tunnel and try to make sure that our bows are plumb, and with a little bit of a push here, you should still be able to move them. and get them visually plumb. And then at this point, we're gonna go ahead and tighten down the strap the rest of the way, get it nice and snug. And we'll go ahead and tighten it a little bit from both ends. The next step is to assemble the solid center purlin. Now, if you have a standard classic tunnel, you'll skip this step. This is for pro tunnels only. We're gonna take our purlin pipes and we're gonna slide the joints together. Most of your pipe sections are gonna be pieces with a swaged end, but you will have one section that is non-swaged that will be your starting piece. And now we're gonna take our self-tapping screw and put it through the joint. Now on the second joint and all of the rest of the joints, if you have a longer tunnel, you need to make sure that the self-tapping screw is in line with the rest of the screws. So we want to make sure that they're all perfectly in a line. That way we can rotate the pipe until all of the screw heads are facing down so we don't get anything puncturing the plastic on the top side. So I've got it facing up there and I'm going to hold the pipe so it doesn't rotate and put the second screw in this joint. This tunnel is 20 feet, so we only actually have 3 sections of purlin pipe. But if you have a longer tunnel, you'll want to follow the steps in the manual, which is to attach 3 sections of purlin pipe and install that. Anything longer than that's going to be really tricky, and you're already going to have 2 people. So 3 purlin pipe sections at a time, and we're going to install those in the peak. Next, we're going to use a tape measure to mark the bow spacing, and that's going to be either 4-foot spacing or 5-foot spacing depending on which tunnels you purchased. So we're going to come down and mark on the bottom side being the same side as the screw heads are on, and we're going to come 5, 10, 15 all the way down the length of this 3-section purlin. Now we're going to install the center purlin at the peak of the tunnel. We have 2 people with 2 ladders here. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come up here. Also, anytime you're drilling or doing screws above your head, especially, you want to make sure you have safety glasses. And we want to put this tube strap in the center of the bow. So you can take a tape measure from your joints and measure up and find the center, or you can just eyeball it. And I'm going to hold this tube strap up here and then get one self-tapping screw installed on the side here. I'm not going to tighten that all the way, but that'll hold it so we can get the purlin slid in there without too much difficulty. Again, we're just doing a 3-pipe section at a time to make it a little easier on yourself. We're going to slide this through, and you want the end of the pipe to be flush with the end of your bow here. And then the other thing you really got to pay attention to at this point is making sure that your screw heads at the joints are facing down. Again, we're trying to make sure we don't puncture our plastic once we get that on. So now we got this in position, we're going to go ahead and tighten down this first screw. And then now that that's secured, we can come put the second screw in. And then a third screw through the tube strap into the purlin. Now we're going to take 2 of our aluminum cross connector pieces and 2 nuts and bolts. The aluminum brackets go over the top of the bow, and then your purlin pipe goes up in between them, and your bolts go through the 2 pieces. You can hold that in place and get the nut started. We want to make sure that the bow is lined up with our spacing mark on the purlin. So we need to slide this over a couple inches till that lines up. And then we want to make sure that the purlin keeps going straight down the tunnel. Now that we have that lined up, everything's lined up with the mark, we'll go ahead and tighten down the cross connector. Now we'll repeat that same process on the rest of the bows. And then on the last bow, we're going to use the tube strap like we did on the first bow. To finish up the purlin, we're going to install these finishing caps. So just hold it up here and start tapping it in. Be careful not to pinch your fingers. That just keeps bugs and stuff from nesting in there, makes it look nice and finished. Now you'll do the same thing on the other end. The next step is to install the wind bracing on the back end of the tunnel. And this is a Classic Pro option. So if you have a standard Classic tunnel, you can skip this step. We're gonna be repeating the same process that we did on the front wind bracing, so you can follow those steps. The next step is to anchor the earth lock anchor system. So we have a band clamp that we need to put around the base of the bow here, and we need to bend it open there, slide it over the bow, and then we'll use our channel locks to clamp it back together. And then we're going to slide this around so that the bolt can go through the tab on the earth lock. So we may need to shift the bow over a little bit to get that bolt through. We can also take our sledgehammer or a regular hammer and tap on this flange here. But we do just have to get that lined up to where we can get the bolt through. Now we'll go ahead and put the nut on and tighten this down using our 1/2" socket. Now we're going to take a self-tapping screw and we're going to put it in through the band clamp into the bow. Now we're just using this to drill a pilot hole. So once you feel that it punctures through, we're going to take it out, and then we're going to be installing one of the included stubby self-tapping screws. And the reason for that is because your rebar is inside the base of the bow here, so there's a lot of interference if you use the longer screw. So go ahead and tighten that down. Now at this point, we're going to drive the diagonal rebar for the earth lock system. So in these oval shaped holes here, that's where the rebar goes. So we're going to drive them in diagonally at a pretty steep angle like this. And what that does is it makes it so much harder for wind or a storm to pull this out of the ground. For context, we've done some testing on this, and it took just under 400 pounds of force to pull the rebar out of the ground. But with the earth lock system, with the rebar down the middle and 2 diagonals, it took about 1,400 pounds of force to pull it out. So we're doing this system on the corners of the tunnel because depending on what kind of end walls and whatever that you do on the end, that is where the brunt of the wind force is going to be. So we want to make sure that these corners are super strong and don't pull up if you have strong winds. We want to drive the diagonal rebars until there's about 3 inches sticking up above the plate. Now we're going to drive the second diagonal rebar through the hole on the inside of the tunnel here. And again, we're shooting for about a 45-degree angle. Now you'll repeat that same process on the other 3 corners of the tunnel. The next step is to install the single channel on the end bows. But before we do this, now's the time to think about your end walls. If you're doing an end wall that requires framing and brackets for like 2x4 framing and stuff, you would want to do that process now because you want the single channel to be able to go over top of all of those brackets. We're going to start all the way at the bottom, putting the channel on top of the anchor plate, and we're going to just be bending it over the bow all the way down. And then on the other side, you'll have to measure your last section and cut it. We're going to take our self-tapping screw, and we're going to be using this to drill a pilot hole, and then we're going to be installing a stubby self-tapping screw into this. The reason we're using these stubby screws here at the bottom is because you would have interference with the rebar on the inside of the bow. Now we'll come up about 1 foot and we're going to put another screw in. If you have interference with the rebar on the inside, use one of the stubby screws. If not, you can just go ahead and use the regular self-drilling. Now you'll repeat the same step on the other side, and also if you're framing an end wall, you'll do that before you do the single channel. The next step is to install the roof plastic. So we're going to roll this out down the length of the tunnel, and we're going to cut it about 2 or 3 feet past the end bow for a tunnel with like a framed end wall, one of our DIY end walls or our zipper end walls, or even a Dutch door end wall. If you're doing the cone end where you bunch the plastic up at the posts, like on a standard classic tunnel, you need to leave about 15 feet of extra plastic on each end of the tunnel. So just make sure you pay attention to that and leave enough extra for the type of end wall that you're going to be doing. So we're going to just roll this out and leave about 3 feet on either end of the tunnel. And we'll take a utility knife or a pair of scissors and trim this off. Now we're going to work on unfolding the plastic and getting it ready to pull up over the top. We also want to make sure our orientation is right. So you have a print mark here in the center of the plastic, and you need to make sure that the orientation of that is such that the printing is on the inside of the tunnel facing down. On this little short tunnel, we're going to just pull it over with 2 people, 1 on each end, and to just work it over with the ladders. If you're doing a longer tunnel, you may need to use some ropes. So what you can do is take a piece of rope or a couple pieces of rope, throw it over the tunnel, and then tie it onto the edge of the plastic. You can take something like a tennis ball and kind of bunch the plastic up around a tennis ball, and then wrap the rope around it and use that to pull your plastic over. But depending on how many people you have, and for a shorter one, you can do it without using rope. The next step is to start securing the plastic with your spring wire. But before we do that, we're gonna center it up. So we wanna make sure that the plastic is centered in the tunnel and that we also have enough plastic on either side to reach the ground. And once we have that, we're gonna go ahead and just pull it tight from each end and start installing the spring wire. So we'll start right at the peak and work our way down on both sides. And as we go, we want to pull all the wrinkles out and try to get it nice and straight all the way down. We'll work our way down to the side, down to the ground on one side, and then come back to the peak and work our way down to the ground on the other side. When you get to the last section of spring wire, if you don't have a good set of wire cutters for cutting this, it's pretty stiff stuff that takes a good solid set of cutters. One way to avoid having to cut it is to just come down and start at the bottom on your last section. And as you work your way up, you'll get to where your last piece left off, and you will probably have an overlap, but that is not a problem. You can put multiple pieces of wire into the same channel. And again, that's just saving you from having to cut anything. Next, we're going to trim the excess plastic. On the sides of the tunnel, you may have quite a bit extra here, and it's good to have a little bit extra in case you want to put some row bags or sandbags to hold it down, but I wouldn't leave more than about 1 foot. So we're going to trim down the side, leaving about 12 inches of extra plastic along the side. And then on this tunnel, we're going to go ahead and trim off the excess plastic on the ends, leaving 3 or 4 inches past the bow. But if you're doing a standard classic tunnel where you're bunching it up into a cone end and tying it off to the posts, you would leave all the excess plastic, and you need about 15 feet like we talked about before. So we'll show that here in a minute in the next step. The next step is to secure the cone ends on your standard classic tunnel. If you have a classic pro tunnel, this will not apply, so you can skip this step. So we've taken all of this extra plastic at the end of the tunnel and slid it down between our 2 ground posts here. And so what we're trying to do is pull all of this tight And if there's any loose places here, you need to identify those and pull them tighter so you get a nice uniform, kind of like a Tootsie Roll look here at the end. Now we're going to take the end of our rope and we're going to go around this plastic. We don't want to include the Purlin strap in this bunch, so we're going on top of the Purlin strap. And I'm going to leave a pretty long tail here, so we have enough to help us tie this off. So we're going to cinch it down really tight. And right here, I'm not like super good with knots. I'm just doing like a square knot. That'll work fine. And then on the tail of that knot, I'm going to do a bite. So now we have this loop here on the tail of that square knot, and we're going to take the other end of the rope and go around our posts here. And at this point, I need to go ahead and cut my rope. One way to make this work without fraying it is go ahead and heat up the rope, melt it a little bit on the exterior, and then if you go and cut it right where you melted it, it gives you a nice clean cut without fraying. You can hit it one more time just to make sure that's not going to fray out. So now I'm going to take that tail and go through the bite here. So we're just going to pull this down nice and tight and then do a slip knot around the line there. And then I'll just take my tail here and put it through the end just so that doesn't pull out. And then that secures it nice and tight. And you can always come back if it starts to loosen up, and you can just pull this knot out and cinch it down a little tighter. Now you'll repeat that same process on the other end of the tunnel. The next step is to install the anti-billow ropes to secure the plastic. And what we're going to be doing is a V shape. So the rope is going to be starting at the end bow and then going over the tunnel and through the easy clip at the base of the second bow, and then back down over to the third bow. And then we're tying a tension knot here to secure that plastic. So in previous models or previous years, if you're familiar with how we did this, we just went back and forth all the way down. This way it gives you a lot more tension on your plastic. And then if you do have any ropes break, you don't lose all of your plastic tension securing it down. So what we're going to do is we're going to coil up a bunch of rope here, and then we're going to throw it over the tunnel so we can slide it through the easy clip at the second bow. So we'll just coil up a bit here, and you'll have to have a helper on the other side of the tunnel. Throw this over. Once they have the tail of the rope on that side, they're going to feed it through the easy clip at the second bow and then throw it back over. Now that we have the rope here, we want to make sure that we have enough rope to make it down to the anchor plate and then back up about, I would say, 6 feet. So we got plenty of extra there. I'm gonna go ahead and pull a little bit back through. Now at the end bow, we're gonna go ahead and cut the rope. To keep it from fraying, we're gonna take our torch here and we're gonna melt the outside of the rope. And then right where we melted it, we're going to cut it. Now just to show you why that's important, if you cut it without melting the outside, it will fray like that instantly. So that'll save you a lot of headache if you melt the outside. And then after you cut it, you can still melt that end a little bit just to make sure it doesn't fray. So now we'll tie a loop here. And then we're going to slip that down through the easy clip. So we have our V shape starting at the first bow and going over to the second bow on the far side of the tunnel, and then back over here to the third bow. And we're going to take the tail end of the rope through the easy clip. And then we're just going to hold that in our right hand, and you're going to make a bite in the rope here. So we're going to run the rope over the back side of our hand, and then we're going to make a twist in it. We're going to loop it around our hand and create an X like that. And then you're going to grab the working end of the rope and pull it back through the loop there, and then that creates your bite. So now you'll take that working end of the rope through the bite, and then this is where you're going to get your leverage to really cinch down the plastic to get it nice and tight. and then you'll make a slip knot there. So let me show that process again. So we're just going around the line and then back through with a loop. And then to make sure that doesn't just pull out, we'll take the tail of the rope and run it back through that loop so it can't just pull out. Now, if you need to come back and tighten these up at any point, you can just pull that tail out of the loop and then pull that knot out, and you can cinch it tighter. Also, if you have too much slack initially and this bite makes it all the way down here to where you don't have enough room to tie that knot, you can just come back here and, well, if you got to pull the working end out of that loop, pull out that bite and redo it up a little bit higher. When you get ready to do the next V rope here, if you already have a rope running through the easy clip, it's a little trickier to get this loop onto the easy clip. And what we don't want to do is just have you put it over one leg of the easy clip, because then that's more likely to bend open and come loose. So what you have to do is you have to take that loop and run it through this first loop here and then over the backside of the easy clip. And once you get it on this leg, then you can pull it. You may have to pull down on this rope to get it through, but then now we can pull it around the loop on the front of the easy clip and you can get it through. Now you can see both of those loops are in parallel on the easy clip and it's nice and secure. Now we'll repeat the same process on the other side of the tunnel, and ultimately at the base of each bow you'll have a rope going in a V shape this way, and a bunch of them will have the slip knot for tensioning. So that's how you install the classic Caterpillar tunnels from Farmer's Friend. If you have any questions, feel free to give us a call or go to our website, farmersfriend.com, and click the support button at the top of the page. Until next time, happy growing.